안녕하세요. Hello, this is Jin-Sam, and this is the grammar for Unit 3. In Unit 3, we're going to study the numbers in 으세요 and Hako in Irang, which means and, the English word and. Right, so first of all, let's study with the numbers. So in Korean, we have two different systems for the numbers. One is native Korean numbers. The other one is Sino-Korean numbers. So we use each of them for a different thing. But here, so for example, when we're talking about a time, particularly for hours, so we use the word she for the hours. We use the native Korean numbers. So here, example. So 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. So 5시. 5시. 5 is the word for 5, and 시 is the word for hour. 5시, 5 o'clock. 7시, which is 7 o'clock. But when we're talking about a time, the minutes part, we use the Sino-Korean number. So the Korean word for minute is 분. So for example, 10분, which means 10 minutes. 10분, 10 is the word for 10. 분 is for the minutes. And another one, 20분, which means 20 minutes. 20 minutes. So 20 is the word for 20. 분 is for the minutes. And the other thing is when we're talking about an age, we use the native Korean numbers. For example, 저는 10살이에요, which means I am 10 years old. I am 10 years old. 저는 10살이에요. So whenever we're talking about age, we use the native Korean number. So 10 is the 10 for 10 is the native Korean number for 10. 살 is a counter for the age. So here in Korea, we use counter for a different thing, and we're going to talk about this in a later slide. But if we're talking about a formal setting, in the formal setting, like in the court of law or in a formal report, we always use the Sino-Korean number. For example, 보고서 1번. 보고서, which means report. So report, case number 1. Call it 1번. 1번. In Sino-Korean number. 1번. Okay. So here, in the vocabulary part, we learn how to read from number 1 to 10. But here, for native Korean number, from number 11 till 9, this is how you read it. So number 11, so the way how you read it is you separate it like number 10 and number 1. So the word for number 10 is 열. And the word for 1 is 하나. So it becomes 열하나, 11. So 15, it's 10 plus 5. So the word for 10 is 열. The word for 5 is 다섯. So it becomes 15, which means 15. So for 19, 10 plus 9. So the word for 10, 열. The word for 9, 아홉. It becomes 열아홉, which means 19. And let's do one more. So 17. 17. The way how you read it is 10 plus 7. So the word for 10, 열. The word for 7, 일곱. So 17 becomes 열일곱. 열일곱 means 17. Okay? All right. So here, the number 1 to 4. So native Korean number 1 to 4, when they use with the counters, the forms changes. So for example, so here, the K is the counter. counter for like the thing or fruit and stuff. And the word for one, 하나, but when we use with the counter, the form changes to 한. So instead of 하나 개, we do it 한 개. So 하나 개, we don't use this. Instead, use it 한 개. The same way, the word for two, 둘, but with the counter, the form changes. So it becomes 두 개. 둘, 개, but we don't use that. And then the number for three is 셋, but with the counter 개, it becomes 세. So 세 개, not 셋 개. And the four, the word for number four, the native Korean number is 넷, but with the counter, form changes. 네. So it becomes 네 개 instead of 넷 개. And for the 20, for 20, the word for 20 is 스물, but with the counter, it becomes 스무 instead of 스물. So we don't say it 스물 개, instead 스무 개. And from 21, so there's one, right? So 스물 하나, but with the counter. The 스물 part is exactly the same, but because 하나 part becomes 한 개. It's the same as 22, 23, 24. So you have 2, 3, 4. 32, 33, 34, it's the same way. Okay, so 22, 스물 두 개. 23, 스물 세 개. 24, 스물 네 개. 32, 서른 두 개. 33, 서른 세 개. 34, 서른 네 개. Okay, just be careful with this one. So that's the only thing that you need to remember. So whenever the number has 1, 2, 3, 4 in it, and it changes the form. Okay. All right. So here, as I mentioned earlier, in Korean, there are a lot of counters for different things. It's more than 15 counters. But here, we're only gonna do 4 different counters that are mostly commonly used. So first one is 개, which is whenever we count things, some fruits or food, we use the counter 개. But when we count bottles, we use the counter 병. For like a cup of or a glass of, we use it 잔. But for per person, like counting person, like 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, we use the counter 명. So first one, we just studied that the form from number 1 to 4, the form changes, right? So for 1 comes 한, and then counter 개. Okay, for example, like 1 apple. 1 apple. And the word for apple is 사과. So that becomes first the 사과 한 개. Right? And 2 apples, 사과 두 개. 3 apples, 사과 세 개. 4 apples, 사과 네 개. Right? And the bottles. So 1 bottle, 한 병. So the word for 하나 plus 병, but the form changes, 한 병. And 2 bottles, 두 병. 3 bottles, 세 병. 4 bottles, 네 병. And a glass of a cup of 잔, a cup of 한 잔. 2 cups of 두 잔. 3 cups of 세 잔. 4 cups of 네 잔. And 1 person, 한 명. 2 people, 두 명. 3 people, 세 명. 4 people, 네 명. So from 5 to 10, The native Korean number part, exactly the same. The form doesn't change. All you need to do is add ke at the end of the native Korean number. Okay. The same way from 11 till 19. For sumul, the 20, and we already learned the form changes, right? So 20, sumu, ke, not sumul, ke, right? And here, 20 bottles, sumu 병, 20 cups of, sumu 잔, and 20 people, sumu 명, right? So from 21, so because there's the number 1, 21개 instead of 21, changes the form 21. So 20 part is the same, but just one part changes it, and then you add counter at the end. So 21, 21개. Okay, 21 apple, 사과, 21개. 21 bottles, 21병. And 21 cups of, 21잔. 21 people, 21명. All right. So this one is the grammar part. So 우세요, 세요. So we conjugate with the verb. So this is the formal and polite ending. Okay. So 우세요. This ending is used whenever you tell somebody to do something in a polite way, very formal and impolite way. Okay. So the conjugation is if the verb stem ends with the consonant, you add 으세요. For example, so 앉다, this is the base form, right? So when after drop 다, so this is the verb stem, right? That's the stem. So 앉다. So here you add 으세요 to the stem 안. It's become 앉으세요, which means please sit down. Please sit down. So 앉다 means to sit. So here, but if the verb stem ends with the vowel or it's a consonant, but if it ends with the consonant 리을, you add it 세요. So for example, 오다, which means to come. So 다 drop, the stem ends with vowel, so you add 세요 to the stem, becomes 오세요, which means please come. Okay, 팔다. So this is the exception. The 팔다, that drop, the verb stem actually ends with consonant, but the consonant 리을. So when you conjugate with this one, first one, first of all, you have to drop 리을. And then it becomes 파, right? And then you add 세요 to the stem. So it becomes 파세요, not 팔세요. Right? So this is exception. Okay? Sorry about the noise. I will continue. So here, exception. So 리을 exception. Okay, so exercise. So 팔다 becomes 파세요. 만들다 become 만드세요. And 열다 become 여세요. 불다 become 부세요. Right? So all you need to remember is you drop 다 and to the stem, in the stem you drop 리을 and then add 세요. Okay? So drop 리을 and add 세요. Drop 리을, add 세요. Drop 리을, add 세요. Right. So here these are the expressions you can use it with it. So let's conjugate first. Okay, 하다, 하세요. 주다, 주세요. 기다리다, 기다리세요. 앉다, 앉으세요. 공부하다, 공부하세요. Okay, so be careful. 조심하세요. Please give me some water. 물 좀 주세요. Please wait a moment. 잠깐만 기다리세요. Please sit here. 여기 앉으세요. Study, do your studies to ask somebody to do something, right? 공부하세요. Okay, so but with the 세요, 으세요, 세요 or like 으세요 ending. So there, sorry. So just the 세요. There's a fixed expressions by using 세요. So here, welcome, 어서 오세요. Then goodbye when the person is leaving. 안녕히 가세요. Right? And the person is staying. You're leaving. 안녕히 계세요. And then saying goodnight. 안녕히 주무세요. Okay, and this is more of like respectful, like honorific form, I would say. Okay, so these are the fixed expressions using 세요. Okay. Another grammar is 하고이랑. So 하고 in English word, it is and. But this word is actually used as a particle. It's not a particle, but the role is like a particle. So all you need to do is you attach to a noun. Right? But be careful without a space. So 하고 cannot be used by itself. So it has to be attached to a noun. Okay, so for example, 우유 and 빵. 우유 is milk, 빵 is bread. So milk and bread. 우유하고 빵. So there's a space. Then 김밥 and 비빔밥. 김밥하고 space 비빔밥. So in a sentence, 우유하고 빵 주세요. Please give me a milk and a bread. Please give me milk and a bread. 김밥하고 비빔밥 주세요. Please give me 김밥 and 비빔밥. So there's another word for and, which is 이랑 or 랑. So here, if the noun ends in a consonant, you add it 이랑. But if the noun ends with a vowel, and you add it 랑. So here, 빵 and 우유. So first word, 빵. This noun ends with a consonant, so you add 이랑. So 빵 and 우유. So 빵이랑 우유. But here, 비빔밥 and kimchi. So bibimbap, the noun ends with consonant, so you add it 이랑. So 비빔밥이랑 kimchi. Okay, but if the noun ends with a vowel, let's say 우유. So now 우유 comes first, milk comes first. 우유 ends with, the word ends with vowel, so you add it 랑 instead of 이랑. So 우유랑 빵. So milk and bread. Kimchi and bibimbap. Kimchi, the noun ends with vowel, so you add it 랑, 김치랑 instead of 김치랑, instead of 이랑. So 김치랑 비빔밥. Okay, so let's practice. So please give me 냉면 and 불고기. So 냉면. So the noun ends with consonant, so you add it. 냉면 이랑 불고기 주세요. Please give me 맥주 and soju. 맥주. The word ends with vowel, so you add it. 랑, 맥주랑 소주 주세요. And please give me 라면 and 비빔밥. 라면. The word ends with consonant, so you have to add it. Which one? 이랑. So 라면이랑 비빔밥 주세요. Here, coffee. Coffee. Right? Ends with vowel. So which one is it? 커피랑 녹차 주세요. Please give me coffee and 녹차. Okay. All right, so that's all the grammar today. So here, let's review. So we learned the 으세요, 세요, former, polite, ending, right? So remember, the verb stem ends with consonant. You edit 으세요, right? But if the vowel, if the stem ends with vowel or the irregular leer, right? Consonant leer, you edit 세요, right? And 하고 used as a particle and attached to the noun, but there is no space, without space. So 하고 you can use with any words, regardless of how the noun ends it. Okay? But 이랑, another words for end, right? 랑 or 이랑, if the noun ends in a consonant, you have to add 이랑. But if the verb, if it's noun, ends with a vowel, and you have to add it 랑. Okay? So that's all for the grammar today. Please make sure you review until you understand the grammar points. Okay? Thank you. 감사합니다.